I'm Jeff Heino, a lifelong learning leader here at Oregon State University, and also a multimedia producer and instructional designer. I'd like to take a couple minutes today to talk about writing for podcasts. I recently came into a project that was pretty interesting, taking some extension material, Oregon Extension Service material, and trying to find a way to make it into podcasts. We're really exploring the idea that written publications at OSU in Extension can have additional life as multimedia products that are add enrichment to the information. So this particular project was submitted as a series of circulars designed to help folks in eastern Oregon, actually, to take better care of their livestock during various parts of the year when things get tough, the winter, for example. So here's a typical circular. This one's the Living on the Land is the name of the series, and it's Winter Livestock Care. 2 pages of good-to-know stuff about taking care of your cows and horses, etc., in cold weather and other conditions. My task was to take that information and recreate it into a series of podcasts. And I want to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned over the years and what's helping, I think, us move this pretty quickly through that process. One is, when it comes to writing for podcasts, it's very important that you write for the ear. It's different than writing for the eye. When you write for someone reading, the reader can move back and forth across the page, reread things, scan, that kind of activity. And that's very different than when you're listening to something. So writing for the ear has some particular constraints and opportunities, if you take advantage of, will make your piece more successful. For example, when you are writing for the ear, be conversational. Pretend the person's in the room with you that you're talking to, and write like you speak. You want to also avoid some of the traditional construction of complex dependent clauses that people can often get involved with writing for the eye. When you're listening to a sentence, it gets very difficult to remember if you started with a dependent clause at the beginning and in the closure is quite a ways away in the sentence, it can be very confusing to the ear. It won't follow. So really try to avoid that and write in maybe shorter sentences. Speaking of short, when we got these manuscripts, they're a couple of pages long, and they'll be just fine when they're put out as publications, and there'll be a couple pages with color photos, etc. But when I looked at this, I realized, again, because we're talking about podcasts, talking about listening in shorter bursts, I took these 3 pages and out of it was able to get 3 podcasts, each probably about 3 or 4 minutes long, which even then might be long for a podcast. So look for how you can chunk the material. Watch for specific pieces of content that can stand alone, and then create a series. And podcasts, though, the whole theory is you want people to come back and hear the next episode. So take a look at chunking. Watch out when you're writing for tongue twisters and other kinds of twisty language. That's why I always read my material aloud when I'm writing it. I'll print it out and I'll actually read it. You may want to close your door so people don't think you're talking to yourself, if that makes you feel uncomfortable. But do read it aloud. You'll really hear what works and what doesn't. And if a phrase is complicated and twisty, then rewrite it. Also, the idea is, because these are short, look for reducing the amount of material, whether this is the total length, and just stick to a couple main ideas that you want to get across with your podcast. I also try to look for an interesting turn of a phrase or metaphors that can help make the piece a little bit more lively. That takes some playing around with. Certain topics might lend themselves to metaphors, others might not, but it's something to keep an eye on. Also, when it comes to finding ways to express things for the ear, watch out for overuse of numerical data. Extension people are in love with numbers, and they're always quoting numbers to help explain their data. But in podcasts, numbers aren't so ear-friendly. So if there's a number involved, why don't you consider finding a metaphor for it? For example, if they say that a typical farm will output 1,000 pounds of cow manure per day, that's a number. It could even be more complicated than that. But why not say a typical farm outputs a full dump trucks full of manure every day? And that just resonates. People can see that dump truck, and they get a sense of scale real fast that they wouldn't get from a number. So use active language, avoid the passive voice. Same rule as you are used to when you're writing for the eye. The same is true for writing for the ear. Also, I tend to look for positive examples when I'm writing for the ear. I don't want to sound negative too much, so if there's the lists of don't do's, if that gets overbearing, I find that kind of tedious. So I tend to be a do-be versus a don't-be writer. Lastly, again, it's a matter of finding your own voice and making your podcast come to life in a way that can sound good and pull the listener in. Using some music and sound effects, for example, is another aspect, as well as following some tips for narration. And that's another topic that I'll be happy to share with you at another time. Meanwhile, thanks for listening, and good luck with your podcasts.
And by the way, I can't wait until the next episode of the particular podcast I'm writing. It's manure management. Happy podcasting.